Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. I want to welcome everybody today to our webinar for program providers for the Iowa STEM Scale-Up initiative. So today we're going to go over a few things about the Iowa program, and then we'll get into some details around the process for submitting a proposal and filling out all the information that's asked for in the online proposal system, and we can answer any questions that people have about the whole process and timeline and everything else. So real quickly, just to let you know who I am, my name is Mark Loveland. I'm a Senior Research Associate here at WestEd. We have been working with Change the Equation for a number of years now on their STEMworks program, providing technical assistance around developing the online proposal submission system and the website with the database for all of the programs that are already currently in STEMworks. And we've also been providing reviewers for program proposals that come in nationally to STEMworks, and then also part of the training process and providing technical support for states like Iowa that are using STEMworks to review programs at the state level. I don't know if Klaus, I saw Klaus was logged on. Klaus, are you on the line? Did you want to say a few words if you are? I know Klaus is headed to the airport, but
I just left him in a meeting. I'd be surprised if he was with us. Okay.
If you hear from anybody at Change the Equation, it will be Klaus. He's the Director of Research and has been involved in directing the STEMworks program. So if you engage with anybody at Change the Equation, it will most likely be Klaus. And then I just wanted to give Jeff and Sarah a few minutes to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about specifically what's going on in Iowa. So Jeff, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I'm dialing in from Wisconsin where I just left Klaus in a meeting, so apologies if my audio is not perfect, but I'm going to take just a minute to give everybody a quick and dirty background on how Iowa came to operate this STEM Scale-Up program. 2011, our governor launched the Governor's STEM Advisory Council, and it's been funded ever since to the tune of about $5 million a year by the Iowa legislature, plus a variety of private sector investments. The majority of those dollars every year goes into this program called Scale-Up. This was a brainstorm of the STEM Council in their early days. The elevator version of this was that Iowa's Governor's STEM Council decided that the K-12 youth of Iowa ought to have access to some of the best-known STEM programming, curricula, kits, PD, etc., as any kids in the world. And they also knew that they were not the ones to write it or create it. But fortunately, we all know people who are that talented, and that became the RFP process, the request for proposals annually, launched across the country and around the world, in fact, seeking the best-known STEM programming as defined by an application that proposers are asked to file. Initially, the first 2 years, Iowa went about this on our own. We borrowed heavily from the design principles of Change the Equation in our own proposal process and had Iowa reviewers take up the challenge of sifting through the applications, which typically number in around 30 each year. And from that 30, an application and a rubric are used to filter down to a manageable 10 to 12, somewhere between 9 and 12, actually, I think, year after year. And those are based on responses, obviously, to the application regarding sustainability, ROI, return on investment, the dollars per use of the dollars per teacher, evidence of effect on kids of diversity, evidence of impact on student interest, as well as skills and performance improvement as a result of taking part in the program. And these are all on the application that you see now. Fast forward 2 years then, Klaus and Change the Equation, as Mark mentioned, have a STEMworks database that they also launched around 2011 based on their own design principles to seek out and populate a database at Change the Equation with the best known STEM programming that would want a position on the STEMworks database to compete through an application process with a wonderful partnership with WestEd, as Mark mentioned. It occurred to Klaus and I that we ought to go in on this together, as we were doing something microcosmic in the state of Iowa that Klaus and WestEd were doing at the national level. So here we are today with the announcement for round 6, I believe, of the STEM Scale-Up Program's 2018-19 academic year is what we're looking toward now, and launching through Dr. Sara Berry's hard work, the RFP in partnership with Change the Equation, so that Iowa's solicitation brings in a dual benefit. Everybody on the line right now who's intending to propose for scaling in Iowa has the advantage as well of establishing status on the nationally exposed STEMworks database. So a win-win, and the process that Sara may talk you through later on this afternoon is the application process through October 9, I believe. Shortly thereafter, a partnership with WestEd enables the Iowa reviewers to enjoy the same rigorous training as the STEMworks database reviewers that WestEd provides, so that we bolster the confidence of Iowans in the professionalism with which these programs are going to be selected. Sometime in the new year, early in the new year, they'll be identified, and those finite number of somewhere between 8 and 12 programmers will become our best friends and partners in the year to come. Through the spring of 2018, we'll advertise your programs, if selected, to the teachers of Iowa, for the most part at no cost to them, to apply for being awarded our Scale-Up selected programs in fall of 2018. Through spring, at some point, the regional managers of the Iowa STEM Network and the regional boards will make a selection of some subset of teacher applications and effectively turn over the awarded educators to the program provider, who then in summer of 18, fall of 18, and spring of 18 works with a flock of Iowa educators on the implementation of the program. The number of awarded educators can range anywhere from, half a dozen to 150. It really depends on the market and the program, and that is the current status. We have programs that are relatively small in scaling, such as First Robotics Competition, FRC. I think we're around 12 or 13 scaling awardees for FRC this year across our state, to as high as almost 300, I believe, in the case of an early elementary STEM program called Ramps and Pathways. So the numbers can be wildly variable. The market plays that out, and then we engage by region in partnerships financially as well as programmatically with the selected partner for next year. That's the long and short of it. I'll end by stating that an annual external evaluation of Iowa's STEM program continually finds that students who take part in the STEM programs, which number approximately 1/5 of the K-12 kids of our state every year, outperform kids who do not take part in these scale-up programs across the board in science and mathematics, across grade levels, elementary, middle school, and high school, with a particularly prominent achievement discrepancy among Iowa's underrepresented, underserved populations. So it clearly appears to work. These statistics are associative, not cause and effect, but they certainly have everybody optimistic about the impact that we'd all hoped for being realized by selecting the best known programs to grow throughout our state. So that's my introduction. I'll try to stay on for the duration of the call in case something comes up, but let me pause and invite Dr. Sara Berry to comment on any details that I have not mentioned.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, super. Well, I think Jeff covered it really well. I just wanted to kind of introduce myself this way that I'll be, if you have any questions about the process, a great starting point person would be me, and my email address is sarah.berry@drake, drake.edu. And with that, I'll let Mark kick it off.
Sarah, do you want me to so I was going to walk through the STEMworks site in general, and then I can go through the Iowa-specific page, and then do you want to go through the Iowa-specific questions?
I'd be happy to.
Okay. So let me go through this first, just to give people a sense of kind of where we're coming from. If you haven't already taken an opportunity to go to the STEMworks site at changeequation.org, this gives you a real good sense of the kinds of programs that have come in through the STEMworks review process. Again, any program that comes in at the state level, so any programs, new programs that are coming in through the Iowa process, as far as the general STEMworks criteria and review process, those programs would be added to the database of programs that are already included in STEMworks. So I encourage you to go through and look at some of these programs. It gives you a good sense of what kind of information is provided for these programs. So again, there's a very high visibility for programs that are included in the database. You can see towards the bottom for any of the programs that are listed how they scored on the 10 different design principles that Change Equation has developed for STEMworks. So these are the areas that are part of the proposal process and that the reviewers focus on as far as the STEMworks piece. From this site, you can also get to the proposal submission site, and under how it works, you can go to the specific page for Iowa programs. So on here are all of the important dates and deadlines. We are here today at September 8th with our webinar. There's also other information about the proposal submission process and the review process. So again, there's a little bit different process for programs that are already part of STEMworks. They only need to respond to the Iowa-specific scale-up questions, and other programs will need to go through the complete STEMworks submission program. But I'll go through those in a little bit. Why don't we, while we're here, I can pull up the Iowa-specific scale questions, and Sarah, if you want to just walk through those real quickly, and then we can go to the general STEMworks submission site and go through that process.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So a couple of sort of housekeeping notes about the way that we are having you submit this. If you're submitting one course or one program, that whole process can happen in the STEMworks website exchange, that sort of site. If you are a program provider that is submitting more than one course, and a course we sort of define as being a target for different grade levels or different, it would be listed as different classes, then that would be something we expect you to submit a separate proposal. And if you have questions about how to designate that are specific, you know, your specific situation for your specific program, that's a great thing for us to have an individual conversation about, and my contact information is in that How It Works page. So please reach out to me if you have questions about that. The first question about the Iowa education standards, we're really looking for links that you can concisely show our reviewers how your program integrates the Iowa core curriculum, which includes science, technology, engineering, you know, the science core, next generation science standards in Iowa, the Iowa core math, and our 21st century skills standards. There's a link there to our 21st century skills and cross-curricular standards if you need to reference that. But really looking for examples in your proposal of how specific parts of lessons can then apply to the standards, the Iowa standards, because our educators look at that when they decide what programs to apply for when it's their turn to apply. The next section, if you don't mind scrolling down, Mark, I'm using your using your slides for my reference. Thank you. So the next section is scalability. We need to show that you have the human resource capacity to replicate across the state of Iowa. So demonstrating that you have the human capacity to answer questions if a great number of Iowa educators apply. As Jeff mentioned earlier, the numbers could be as small as half a dozen and as large as 300 different implementation organizations across the state. So we're really looking for evidence that you have a plan in place to make sure that our Iowa educators can be served quickly. Next question. Thanks, Mark. In the professional development, of course, that's a very important part of moving the needle in Iowa. The Scale Up program is designed to sort of whet educators' palate for great STEM education, and we expect that the programs are more than, the professional development for the program is more than just here's how to use the kit. If you're a kit-based program, you know, we expect it's getting into helping educators develop pedagogical skills and content knowledge that they're going to need to implement excellent STEM programming. And some of those research-based ideas around what makes good professional development for educators, like it is sustained support with multiple touch points throughout the year, not just a one and done. So those are some of the things that we're looking for in the professional development section. When it comes to engaging all learners, we're really looking for evidence that shows that your program has a record of doing an excellent job of reaching all learners. So we're looking for underrepresented groups in STEM, making sure that we can help serve those groups in a way that is excellent in all students. But we include in our underrepresented groups not just racial minorities, but also students with disabilities, low socioeconomic status, even underachievers educationally, so low test scores. Iowa has a large number of rural population as well as urban population. We all know that girls tend to be underrepresented in the physical sciences, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So show us some evidence of how your program has done a good job to reach all learners. I think the next one is the world of work. Yeah, so connection to the world of work. Iowa STEM started as, it's really an economic development initiative that acts through education. And so our goal with this programming really is not only to develop STEM literate citizens, but also help our students connect their learning to STEM careers, specifically in Iowa. And we have a list there, you know, some key industries in Iowa: agriculture, advanced manufacturing, information technology, and health careers. It doesn't need to be limited to that, but that's really what we're looking for, is how is this program going to help us grow our future workforce? and connect your outstanding educational experience that your program provides with careers that exist here in our state. And the last section is the project resources. That really is the information about your budget. An important thing to note is the way that we define an implementation unit. An implementation unit is a team, an after-school club. It's basically an educator and his or her students. And so we ask that how you present your budget is based on that particular unit of implementation. I'm trying to think if there are any other frequently asked questions that I want to address. If you're a returning program, meaning that your program has been a scale-up program in Iowa in the past, there are also some additional elements like a sustaining budget for educators that have received your program in the past, how you would help them apply for something that would help them sustain it an additional year. But again, if you have individual questions, it is my job to help answer those, and so please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Sarah and Jeff. Any questions at this point? If not, we'll move on, and I can talk a little bit more about the proposal process as a whole and what you need to do and know as a program and service provider. Sarah, we did have a question. Are these the same questions for Iowa, the Iowa-specific scale-up questions that were on last year's RFP?
Yeah, they're very similar. The only difference is the format that we're asking our budget questions in. It's more of kind of a fill-in-the-blank worksheet this year, with an opportunity then to still provide the narrative explanation, justification of the budget, but the essential questions are the same.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, then we will move on to the review of the process and the design principles that form the basis of the proposal application. So as I said, at changetheequation.org, we have the STEMworks database of programs and the link to the homepage for the proposal process. You've seen all that now. The process involves a couple of steps. The first thing that we ask programs to do, first you will register as a program. That registration will, once you submit that, you'll receive an automated reply giving you access to the program profile page. The profile for our purposes really gives us a sense of what kind of program you are, what kind of services you provide, who your primary audience is, your target audience, what grades you're working in, what areas in STEM specifically you're working in. So there's a number of broad questions about the program itself that go into the profile. This ultimately ends up, for programs that are included in the database, this forms the basis of what's in the public profile that can be viewed from the STEMworks website. Once you've completed a program profile, you're asked to do what we call a pre-screen. The pre-screen is largely a way to make sure that programs have everything that they need to be able to complete and submit a full completed proposal application. Early on, before we did the pre-screen, we often got applications from programs that were really incomplete. They just didn't have the kinds of documentation that the reviewers need to see to be able to really do a full review of the program. So for the new programs, you'll be asked to submit some pre-screening documents, and as I said, these are documents that we would expect most programs to already have or to be able to either produce or identify very quickly. On the list are things like a strategic plan, an annual report, a budget report, list of partners, an evaluation plan, organizational chart, alignment to standards, so any kind of documentation around how you are aligned to content or practices standards, and then any sample curriculum or program activities or materials. So again, this just undergoes a very quick review that then once we know that you've got the basic documents to support the proposal, you will be then provided access to the full proposal submission site. And what does that look like? So what I'm showing here is a view of the proposal as it is seen from the reviewer's perspective. But it essentially has the same information that you will see if you go in as a program or service provider. The proposal application is broken down into 10 sections. Those are based on the 10 design principles that Change Equation has developed for STEMworks. Within each section, you'll be asked to provide 3 things. The first is a self-rating for that section, and as you'll see in a minute when I go through these in a little bit more detail, there are 3 levels of ratings that we have for each design principle. The lowest level is what we call undeveloped. Undeveloped really means, holistically across the board, that the program just hasn't provided any evidence or shown any indication that they've addressed the criteria for that principle in any meaningful way. Undeveloped really means that the reviewers are struggling to find anything that relates to the criteria for that principle. Developing is in the middle. It indicates that reviewers found, at least from the reviewer's perspective, that they found evidence both in the explanation and in the documentation provided that the program is addressing the criteria for that principle. They at least have a good start on addressing the criteria, but there are still elements that the reviewers would like to see, either more information or higher quality from the program itself. And then the highest rating level for each principle is what we call accomplished. And this really means that the program is doing everything to meet the criteria for each design, for that design principle, and that they're really able to provide a documentation and evidence to support their explanation around why they should be rated at that level. So those are the 3 levels: accomplished, developing, undeveloped. We ask that the programs do a self-rating, so that's the first thing you would do. So reviewers will see what the program, how the program rated itself for that principle or for each principle. The other 2 areas that the programs need to complete for each principle, the first is this text box with an explanation for why they feel their program should be rated at the level that they provided for the self-rating. That explanation and just 2 real strong suggestions. The first is that we also provide a rubric for with the criteria for the 3 different levels for that design principle. I'm going to go through the design principles in a few minutes, but Just know that we have a rubric that we provide for the programs to use when they are submitting their proposal. This is the same rubric that reviewers use when they review the proposal. So I strongly encourage programs to structure their explanation for why they believe they are rated at the level that they indicated. I strongly suggest that you use this rubric to structure your response. So, for example, with this one that we're looking at under evaluation, program goals are well-defined and link directly to the statement of need and the identified target audience. So this relates to the first principle, but just being able to outline and structure your explanation using the rubric is the easiest way to help the reviewers understand what it is that your program is doing and how it directly addresses the criteria in each of the design principles. I want to just review a little bit and reiterate that this process is not intended to evaluate programs as good or bad programs. It's simply a process that helps us evaluate programs relative to the design principles that are part of STEMworks and which Change Equation has developed as reflective of things that funders and users and implementers think are important for programs to be able to demonstrate and communicate about their work. So again, all of the review ratings and feedback are given with respect to the design principles and with the rubric squarely in mind. So again, recommendation number one, strongly recommend that you use the rubric to structure your explanation. This makes it as easy as possible for the reviewers to follow and be able to evaluate how well it's meeting the criteria in the rubric. The third area of the proposal application, and the second part that I really want to make a strong recommendation for, is right next to the text box there are documents that support the rating for this principle, the program's rating for this principle. Programs are asked to submit documentation evidence around their explanation for the rating that they've indicated for that principle. All documents are in the form of a PDF. If you have a website that you want reviewers to take a look at, you can put the URL in the explanation text box. But all the documentation that is uploaded in support of the explanation and the program's rating for that principle are in the form of PDFs. It's a very simple, straightforward uploading process. And then you can indicate in each principle which of those documents you feel are in support of the explanation and the rating that you've provided for that principle. The second strong recommendation that I have is that you make clear reference to the documents in your explanation. Do not, so for example, evaluation is a common area where a program might provide an evaluation report from a third-party evaluator. This might be a 200-page document with extensive details and data collected as part of an evaluation plan. If you are pointing to a specific piece of that report, please make reference to that in the explanation. So if you are talking about the impact that your program had on students' learning over the last 5 years as evidenced by data collected by the third-party evaluator, please refer to the report and ideally the page number. Like any other proposal process, we want programs to make this process of reviewing the proposal as easy as possible for the reviewers. So including as much documentation as you can is strongly encouraged, but make it easy for the reviewers to access that by clearly referencing where in the documents they should put their attention in the explanation box. Again, reviewers will look at everything that is submitted, but it can be very frustrating if there are numerous dozens of documents and no references to what you should be paying attention to as a reviewer in those documents. So again, structuring your explanation around and using the rubric, specifically addressing the criteria that are described in the rubric. Please do that as much as you can. That helps the reviewers follow through your explanation using the rubric. And again, referring to those documents that you have provided in support of your rating and your explanation, referring to them directly and in a detailed way so that reviewers know exactly where to look to see where that documentation is in support of anything that you've provided in the explanation. So again, just please try to be as detailed as you can, provide as much documentation as you can, and as a whole, reviewers will be much happier if you're able to do all of that. The next thing are those design principles that I mentioned that are the basis for the proposal application and for the review. There are 10 design principles. The first 6 are referred to as overarching principles, and I'll quickly go through each of these in a minute. These overarching principles focus largely on aspects of the program as a whole and how the program operates. These first focus on the statement of need. Does the program identify and target a compelling and well-defined need? I'll get into some details about what that looks like in a minute. And then the second principle looks at evaluation. Does the program use rigorous evaluation to continuously measure and inform progress in addressing the identified need? Okay, so those are the 2 basic things that really feed into the rest of the application. The other 4 overarching principles look at sustainability. Is the program able to ensure that the work is sustainable? That doesn't mean that the program is fully funded for the next 10 years. We're basically assuming that programs are coming into this because they would like to receive additional support or funding. But we do want to see how the program has ensured that it is sustainable in the past, what opportunities it's been able to take advantage of, what challenges it's been able to meet, how it's been able to engage with stakeholders. So a number of different things that are asked for there. And just this is the first example. This does lead right into those Iowa-specific questions that Sara presented earlier. So much of the same information that you're going to use on for the STEMworks design principles, you'll also see in the Iowa-specific questions. So they do build off of one another. The next overarching principle looks at replication, replicability, and scalability. Is the program able to demonstrate not just that it's done that, but that it has processes and systems and tools and resources? What are those tools and resources and processes that the program uses when scaling up, when going to new users? So again, as much detail as possible there is appreciated. Next, we look at is the program able to create high-impact partnerships? So who are the partners that the program works with to address areas of need that the program is not able to do itself? So these are content developers, these can be reviewers, these can be learning science experts, they can be content experts. So however it is that you are engaging with partners outside of your organization, we would just want to know the nature of that and what the role is for each of these partners. And then the last principle looks at organizational capacity. And this, again, addresses one of the areas with the Iowa-specific questions. Is the program able to ensure that it has the capacity to achieve the goals that it's stated prior in the application in the proposal? The second set of principles, G through J, are referred to as the STEM-specific principles. This is where the reviewers really get a sense of how strong this program is in presenting STEM to participants, students, and teachers. So the first three STEM-specific principles focus on STEM content, STEM practices, and inspiration and engagement in STEM. And so this really defines programs in a number of different ways. Some programs, ideally, we want programs to be doing all three things, focusing on providing STEM content through experiences that engage with the various STEM practices. And we want all of those experiences to inspire students to be more engaged in STEM, both STEM education and further down the road, STEM careers. So those three principles really focus on how the program is engaging students with STEM. The fourth STEM-specific principle really looks at how does the program engage with students or participants who have traditionally been underrepresented in STEM. And this works on a couple of different levels. Again, this is reflected in the Iowa-specific questions, but this is looking at specifically how does the program identify and address the needs of groups that have been underrepresented in STEM traditionally. It also goes a little bit further and looks at how does the program accommodate the needs of diverse learners through a variety of different means, and also that not only are you identifying underrepresented groups and diverse learners, you're addressing the needs of those groups and those learners. So it really does go into an area that Change the Equation has been very focused in, and as you see in the Iowa-specific questions, something that Iowa is also focused in terms of really addressing the needs of diverse learners and groups that have traditionally been underrepresented in STEM. Any questions about the design principles at this point? I'm going to go into a little bit more detail quickly for each of these, but just wanted to give you a sense of how this looks broadly. Okay, so as I said, there is a rubric that has been developed that goes into a little bit more detail around each of the design principles. As I mentioned before, the rubric on the proposal submission site clearly lays out criteria for that, that principle at the three different levels: accomplished, developing, and undeveloped. And so, again, strongly encourage that programs in developing their proposal address each of the parts of the rubric to really demonstrate how you are meeting the criteria laid out in each of the principles. There's also some sample evidence. These are, again, documentation that we feel in the past have been able to provide reviewers with a good sense of what is really being done by the program to support the work that they're doing for that principle. So again, some of this evidence will be asked for in the pre-screen, just to ensure that the program has it as they head into submitting the full proposal. So what does this look like? I'm just going to quickly go through each of these and highlight a couple things that are particularly important for reviewers so that programs can see what are the things that are being focused on by those reviewers when they are looking at the proposal as a whole. The first principle looks at need. Does the program address a compelling and well-defined need? Just before I go into that, I wanted to point out this note at the top. The rubric has been structured in a way that the first two principles really set the tone and are used as a foundation and are referred back to consistently throughout the rest of the principles in the, on the proposal application. So the first principle around need is critical. It identifies in that statement a clear and compelling and a need that is supported by recent, valid, and targeted data. So again, this is very important to set the tone. If you are a program and you say you are focusing on STEM education across K-12, that's a very ambitious and broad need that you are saying that you are going to be addressing. So in terms of being able to demonstrate that you are addressing that need, there's going to be some high expectations from the reviewers. If you say you are focusing on middle school girls in engineering because assessments have shown that girls underperform relative to boys in engineering in middle school, that's a much more focused and easily defined need that you can say you are addressing. Again, we look for recent, valid, and targeted data around that need. So being very clear to say, here's why we're doing this, here's what the need is as demonstrated by evidence and by data for that target audience. That's the other part of this. Who is the target audience? Again, be as clear and detailed as possible. Again, having a target audience that is very broad, all K-12 students in the U.S. is just, it really, it ends up hurting a program. We want to know really where you're focusing on. How does the program demonstrate that it's reaching the target audience, and how does the program make clear that it adds unique value in addressing the need? Again, just ensuring that this program, one of the things to keep in mind is that there are going to be a lot of programs that might be focusing on the same need, and reviewers want to understand why is your program a better option than other programs, whether it's programs providing professional development for teachers, or it could be you know, science curriculum providers. Whatever it is, we want to know as reviewers why your program and not others that may be addressing the same need. Moving through evaluation, as I said before, evaluation is that other critical element for the entire proposal. What does it do? Well, it is where the program is able to state what its goals are, what are the program goals, and then how does it collect data and use that data to make improvements and monitor progress towards those goals. So again, if you are just a program provider that without goals, it's real hard to understand what your purpose is. What are you really trying to do? So, so taken together, these first two principles really set the tone for the entire proposal. What is the need? Who is the target audience? Can you demonstrate that you're reaching that target audience and addressing that need in a unique way? That you're able to provide evidence of what your program is doing, what are the goals that your program is trying to achieve, and that you're able to demonstrate improvement or progress towards achieving those goals as a program. All of that comes into play in those first two principles and really sets the tone for the rest of the proposal. Moving through these, again, just there are some very specific things in each of these that I wanted to touch on real quickly. Sustainability, we really do want to understand sort of the financial operations of your program. If you are a for-profit program that is providing services by collecting user fees, okay, so you know, basically you're in the marketplace with other similar service providers. How are you trying to ensure that your revenue model is sustainable? How are you comparing yourself, or how are you marketing yourself compared to other programs that are similarly situated? What kind of opportunities have you taken advantage of? For example, have you received grants? Have you received support from foundations? What are some of the challenges that you've had to work with? So again, just as much detail as you can, and this again will feed into that Iowa-specific question around sustainability as well. So again, just being as specific as you can, as detailed as you can, is very, very helpful. Replication and scalability. The one thing I wanted to say about this is that this is really a very document and evidence-heavy principle. We want to know when it says program documents how it can be scaled or replicated. That doesn't just mean throwing out numbers saying that, for example, we've grown from 1 state to 5 states in the last 2 years. Just saying that you've grown doesn't really indicate any idea of how that growth has been documented, how it's supported. So what we ask for are as much as you can provide in terms of documentation around what kind of support, what kind of resources, what kind of tools are provided for new adopters or new users, new implementers. So what is that process? What does that process look like? What is the program providing for new users as they scale up their program? So again, providing as much documentation as you can. Don't just throw out numbers to say we've grown before and we'll keep growing. We want to know what that process, that growth process looks like. Partnerships, this is a common one for programs to sort of underperform, if you will. We often will get just a list of partners. And in general, across all of these principles, a list of things and summaries can get you to developing, but reviewers really want to see details around those lists or details of any kind of summary. So in this case, a list of partners might get you to developing, but we want more information about what those partners are actually doing. So letters of support, work plans, MOUs, anything that really describes the role of the partner and what it's doing, how it's contributing to the operations of the program itself. So again, do not just provide a list. That really doesn't do very much for the reviewers. Capacity is another document-heavy principle, and this should be pretty straightforward. An organizational chart, resumes or CVs for staff that are involved in the program. Really understanding how does this program have the organizational capacity to accomplish the goals that it has set forward. Does it have a track record in STEM education? Does it, can it demonstrate that the program staff or volunteers have STEM subject matter expertise? So all of those details, again, across the program. So as much as you can provide is appreciated. We also like to have some understanding of how you train staff or volunteers. What kind of professional development do you provide? What kind of evaluation do you provide for your staff or volunteers so that they can continue to do the work that they're doing? And then lastly, as I mentioned, the last 4 principles focus on content, practices, and inspiration engagement, and then especially the needs of underrepresented groups in STEM. The one thing I will say here, and this kind of falls under the same recommendations that we just went over, a list that aligns or that shows an alignment of standards to program activities, say lesson plans or units. A straightforward list, again, might get you to developing, whether it's content or practices, but what we really would like to see are examples of program materials. So examples of curriculum materials, examples of lesson plans, examples of agendas for if it's a camp or after-school program. Anything that is experience-based, we want to see what it's really doing. We want to know how it's connecting to participants' real-world experiences. How is it connecting, allowing students to or participants to transfer knowledge from one context to another? Are there high expectations for the participants, or is it just an activity that they do and we don't really know how well they've done in understanding or developing skills? So for content and practices, really, again, examples of what your participants are doing, not just a list of activities aligned with standards. Inspiration, this is a little bit of a tricky one. I just want to mention that this is about inspiring interest and engagement in STEM. STEM learning, STEM education, STEM careers. This is not about interest and engagement in your program. We often get, participant satisfaction surveys. I had a great time. I loved it. I had a lot of fun. That's great. We want, we want participants to be inspired and engaged in participating in your program, but we want to know how your program is actually inspiring and engaging students in STEM. So this can be done through surveys, positive experiences, a number of activities, and ways that you can demonstrate that. And then again, as I said before, with underrepresented groups, it's not just about identifying who these groups are. It's not just providing demographic data, and it's not just about identifying or showing that you're recruiting those groups into your program or for your program. We want to really understand what are the needs for those groups. What are the reasons why these groups or the individual learners have not succeeded in the past in STEM, and how is your program addressing those needs? So again, more details, more data, more evidence is better. So that is a quick run through of those of the proposal process and of the application areas and the principles that are part of all of that. So at this point, I think we're ready to wrap up, but are there any questions from anybody about any of the whole STEMworks process or around Iowa specifically? All right, I will take that as a no. Again, if you have specific questions about the Iowa specific questions, please let Sarah know. If you have any questions or technical issues accessing the system or questions around the STEMworks principles, please let us know at WestEd. You'll have a CTEQ email that's part of the application process, and Sarah just put her email up again on the chat, sarah.derry@drake.edu. So if there aren't any more questions, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to participate in this, and hopefully everybody's ready to go in terms of putting together their proposal and submitting their applications. So thank you again, everybody, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody.